Okay, good evening everyone. Okay, see, according to me, the most interesting article for the day is this one, which most people will ignore. I'll tell you why this is the most interesting article. Okay, an uncertain solar powered future. Okay, this is about the sociological impact of energy transition. What do I mean by sociological impact? See, if you are moving away from the conventional technology to renewable technology like solar, it is going to have some impact on the existing communities there because you won't get new land. You will have to extract land from the same amount of land that we have because land is not a renewable resource. It is limited. So, the question that we have to ask in this journey towards energy transition is clean energy always, is it necessarily meaning that it is just energy? Is there social justice aspect in the transition towards clean energy? Is there a context for this question? Do you think UPSC will ask questions like this? Yes. GS1 this time. Examine the ecological and economic benefits of solar and wind energy generation. You've had this question. Remember? How many of you saw this previous year questions? Right. So this is what it is. Now let's read the first paragraph and you will understand. The story begins with two women who were from the past 20 years, who were friends, and they were getting their cattle to graze in this open land. Now there is a solar energy plant, a floating solar energy plant that is coming up there. And if you take a look at that background, it also includes a water body where fishing is taken up. Now this solar plant, which is a floating plant, will have a dual impact on the lives of these people. The fact that their husbands are fishermen and they are indulged in animal husbandry will explain their plight, right? They cannot, take a look at this. After marrying fisher folk in the same village in Jharkhand, which is near the border. Fishing is the livelihood of nearly 2,500 people in that state. So with a single power plant, it is impacting the life of so many people. So when you are asked to discuss the economic benefits, what will most UPSC aspirants do? They'll just simply say that, this is economical, this is not economical, and they'll cast a sweeping judgment as if the impact is homogeneous for all the communities in our country. So this article explains a nuance that every energy transition is not necessarily socially just. Now, how do you fix this? This is the pain point right now. Not only this clean energy transition, in general, every developmental activity traditionally has been disruptive of the lives of the vulnerable sections only. So if you view the sociological aspect of any policy, always remember history has time and again proved that economic divide will manifest as social divide also. If you write down the ecological impacts on social change, there is a correlation between how economic activities will impact the rich and the poor. This is one example. I'll show you another example too. Forest Rights Act. How many of you know that? What is Forest Rights Act? Right. So we'll go to the editorial section there and come back to this again. Take a look at this. We will read out this article because otherwise you will lose out the details. Last month, when Chhattisgarh High Court upheld the cancellation of the community forest rights of Ghatbara village in Chhattisgarh Hasdevaranyas forest, it did not just close a legal case, it also closed the door on justice. What happened here? What are community forest rights? See, this is the classic debate between environment and economy. Our technocratic economic models, which use the technological prowess to extract value out of the natural resources, have historically sidelined the vulnerable groups of Adivasis. So, because of this disparity, they've always had this, unfortunate situation where they were displaced from that land. And if you are an anthropology student, you will know how land is the core idea which holds that community together. Because unlike in normal societies where land becomes a individual property, in tribal societies, land is a community resource. If you take that land which is binding them together, keeping them together, and push them out, the entire society gets dismantled. So, community forest rights are an extremely important right and extremely important legislations for the survival of this vulnerable groups. You see the commonality between these two news items. Rights are all the more important in a state for this set of people who are vulnerable, who do not have the economic access, nor the policies are implemented in their favor. You have a law, community forest rights. Forest Rights Act says that, before you carry out any economic activity, you will have to take the consent of the local population through a Gram Sabha. And this is reiterated in the 2013 Niyamgiri case. Okay. Vedanta Group, which is famous for its metal extractions through bauxite mining, aluminium. So that company was involved in mining activities in the Niyamgiri hills of Odisha. So after that, when the case was over, this principle was established that the primacy of Gram Sabha should be respected and should be upheld before taking up any activities with respect to economics of that region. You should not exploit the economic resources without the consent of the Gram Sabha. Something happened in this region, Ghatbara, which is the place where this present case is there. Many hundreds, if not thousands of trees were cut down. And that did not have any consent from the Gram Sabha. When a case was filed, the court struck it down on procedural grounds. What do you mean by this procedural grounds? If you see the technicality, forest rights cannot be claimed if there is an encumbrance. What do you mean by encumbrance? There is someone else who is owning that property. So just because someone invested some money on cutting down the trees, the court deemed that there is some precedence and some ownership on that land, and they refused to stay the cancellation of this forest rights which were bestowed upon this population on the procedural grounds. What does this leave us with? Ultimately, is the spirit important or the procedure? What does this signify? That the community forest rights do not get precedence over economic importance, which is essentially overruling the Niyamgiri judgment itself. The fact that this is given by Chhattisgarh High Court, where there is a dissonance between what the Supreme Court says and the High Court say. Now this will have some litigation. This will again be appealed in Supreme Court. Again there will be judicial delay. So for something as simple as where you should live, continue to live, when there is a clear-cut legislation, judiciary's apathy and dissonance sometimes in terms of how they conduct themselves, whether they should go for procedure or they should go for the spirit of the law. Since there is no uniformity over this, it creates so much confusion and chaos in governance. So this is an issue which requires an understanding of the social structures, their social practices, the relative importance of a certain issue with respect to the economy, and how the same economic resource is viewed by an entire community. Land. Land is a private property for one, a communal property for the other. For one, it is about economic loss. For the other, it is about existence. Their entire existence is under question. And it is because of this fact, it becomes an issue of social justice. Access to economic resources, whether it is land, technology, internet, should be a matter of right, because the preamble itself promises equality of opportunity. We need to have opportunity. It should be just, but not in such a way that it denies the other person the same opportunity that we promised. So this is the common theme between this article and the article that I had shown. In both this, you have to understand that, let's go back and I'll show you one line. Yeah, take a look at this, because these kind of articles are rare, and unless and until you read it from the lens that I just explained, you will not be able to map it to GS1 questions. Nobody would have thought that ecological and economic benefits of solar energy would be asked in GS1. All of them wrote economy and environment answers, but they failed to realize that it is not about economy and environment, but sociology and geography. That is the reason why they asked it in GS1, not GS3. Otherwise, why would they ask it in GS1? Look at this article, you'll understand. Read this. Read this. Rajan Tudu, in his 50s, who heads some organization in Jharkhand, asks whom the solar power project will serve and if it will lead to any development for those who live in that project areas. Very, very valid question, right? We lost our homes after the 1950s and settled on wasteland. Today, most of the displaced families still do not have landholding documents. It led to many issues. They're not giving access to Aadhaar cards. And even recently, you know that how they were disenfranchised. If the same SIR activity is taken up in other districts, other states, these people do not have basic documentation. So are you telling them that they don't belong to this country? Is this the kind of development we would want? No, right? So how do we solve this problem? Energy transition should not just be about moving from one spectrum of misery to another. You need to make people participants in this process too. So every infrastructure project will definitely have some social cost. And that social cost should not be disproportionately borne by those who are already vulnerable. It should be shared equally, no, equitably, not equally. What is the difference between equity and equality? It is all about fairness. If you have to give up a piece of land, you might feel that it will have some economic cost because it is just another piece of real estate for you if you are rich enough. But for them, it is their entire life. So no two communities will have the same meaning associated to a small piece of land. Equity is about understanding the difference and acting proportionally. Clear? So please read this beautiful article. I would definitely suggest that these points have so much significance. Mostly these kind of case studies will be ignored. And this is where UPSC is picking up questions from. Alright? Otherwise, everybody is reading editorials these days. There's hardly anything new that comes up. It is in the finer details like this. In that kind of articles, you will see these nuances which are important. Now, Delhi's air, a wicked problem in need of bold solution. Do I have to explain this article? Yes. Shashi Tharoor wrote it. Sometimes we might have to decipher what he's trying to say because of the language. But this time, it's very clear. Why Delhi is having a lot of problems? Simple. It's a mixture of geography, economic models, policy choices, cumulatively creating a very toxic air, where the average air quality is nothing less than 400 and sometimes might reach 1500. Severe is the default. Very severe is, possible in most of the areas of Delhi, except maybe if you are living in Janpat or civil lines area where it is air quality index is somewhere in the concerning region. The worst kind of air quality in Hyderabad is the best that you can find in Delhi. Just an example, comparison. Why did this situation come up? We have discussed. There is a saucer kind of a topography, a valley kind of a topography where the air settles in the winter season. On the top of that, an admixture of reasons like policy choices like, say for example, delay in implementation of the Bharat State 6 emission norms for vehicles, delay in scrapping old vehicles which are extremely polluting, a region surrounded by many polluting industries. In the winter season, you have this stubble burning problem in an area that can fit almost 12 Delhis. All of them together create a very messed up environment. And you cannot expect the problem to just vanish like that because you're banning some industrial activity or coming up with an odd even policy, or if it is haphazard, it's not going to work. Installing smog towers, installing air purifiers in public places. These are all technological fixes. If you don't go back to the basics, where all the solutions should be implemented simultaneously. Unless and until we go in that direction, the problem of air pollution is not going to be solved. That's what Mr. Tharoor also says. So how do we go about it? We must take the example of Los Angeles, where all the emission pathways are handled simultaneously. For example, if you see, how did they overcome the smog crisis? Strict vehicle standards, clean fuel technologies, regional coordination. Same, we can take the example of Beijing. How did they learn? They were, implementing a multi-year action plan, relocating the polluting industries, banning coal in urban areas, which resulted in 35% reduction in the particulate matter. The first half you already know. The second half, the case studies of Los Angeles and Beijing and how they can be implemented in China, in Delhi, is what we are supposed to talk. So he comes up with a policy action, which he calls as Unified Airshed Management Plan that treats Delhi NCR as a single pollution zone. Environment doesn't have political boundaries. If someone burns stubble in Punjab, yes, only the Punjab government can take action. But the impact is not just felt in Punjab, it can be felt elsewhere too. And therefore, environmental problems cannot be handled in silos, in political silos. We need a regional strategy that requires coordination between multiple state governments. If a person is standing on the border of Punjab and lighting a crop stubble, the Punjab police are refusing to act. And on the other side of the border, Delhi police is watching helplessly. If you are strictly going by a political approach where the professionals handling this situation says that no, it's not my jurisdiction. Source is definitely not your jurisdiction, but the impact is. It's up to us whether we'll take that approach or the second approach. It requires a regional strategy, and that's what Mr. Tharoor is also saying. Citizens must know what they are breathing and what is being done to it. What are they breathing? Their death. That's what it is. Literally, if you stay there for, if you get exposed to that on a daily basis, I'm pretty sure it will reduce your lifespan by 10 years in 1 year. I felt so sick in one of the year just because I did not bother putting on a mask. It took me almost couple of months to come back to normalcy just because I was roaming without a mask for 3 days. So please understand that this is not just another pollution issue. It can be about life and death of 2 crore people residing in that region according to official numbers. The unofficial numbers will be much higher because of the inbound and outbound migration. Okay. So it's also about a behavioral issue. Citizen engagement is the key. Pollution is not just a governance issue, it is a behavioral one. This is another insight that we have to keep in mind, because no amount of governance can fix people's problem. Unless people decide that we have to respect law, we have to take care of our environment, governments can't do anything. So please go back and read this. Next is the POCSO Act is general neutral by design. What is the end conclusion? Have a look at that so that you can go back to the basics. The law's objective should be to safeguard children from sexual abuse, irrespective of the sex or gender identity of the person inflicting it. If you see and map this article to any section of the syllabus, what would it be? GS2, vulnerable sections, social justice, within the vulnerable sections, children. When you're talking about children, gender doesn't come into play. Both the genders require equal, protection. So if there is any debate about a law that is meant to prevent sexual violence against children, gender should not be a point of contention. Would you agree? That's what this article is all about. But why did this come into the picture? Because Supreme Court of India recently issued notice on a petition arising from a case in which a woman stands accused of sexual assault against a minor boy, an offense defined in the section 3 of the act. So it's not just about male or female, it's about the protection of the child. Okay? So what is the logic here? Do you have to think about the logic, or do you want to rely on content or common sense? Common sense, right? So how will you justify this stance? The rest of the article is about how will you justify that stance, and if you look at the article from that lens, you will know what points to pick up, what points to ignore. So I am not explaining the content part here. The training here is to learn how we can pick up the information. Let's read the entire article line by line so that you stop depending on some external resource to figure out what is important for UPSC. Now, the end point is clear. We need a law that protects children, period. From what? Sexual violence. Why? Because by the very fact that children are vulnerable and they require protection and safeguarding from the evil aspects of the society so that they have a safe nurturing and grow up into healthy individuals, both physically and mentally, we need a law. That law is POCSO, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012. Okay. So the petitioner has claimed that this provision is gender specific. It applies only to male perpetrators and hence cannot apply to her. So this is a classic case where victims are denied justice and the people who are committing the crime are playing the gender card, which is not right. Going by available evidence, the answer seems to be in the affirmative. Can women be prosecuted for an offense under this provision? The answer is yes. How? The POCSO Act is gender neutral. First, if interpreted properly, the text of the Act does not restrict its application to the male offenders. Okay? And the petitioner has argued that there is section 3 because it uses the pronoun he. You are going by the text, not the spirit. However, section 13 clause 1 of the General Clauses Act, there is one law for situations like this. For people who are extremely smart, the government and the legislative bodies have another act called the General Clauses Act. Words importing the masculine gender shall be taken to include females. Since the act lays down rules and definitions to aid statutory interpretation. Okay, so the takeaway and the gist of this article is, let your common sense prevail. If you are saying that it is gender neutral, what about the kids? They can be any kinds of pervert. Perversion can be gender neutral. How will you safeguard the kids? That's why you need to focus on what arguments to take from an article. Now, do you have any doubt on what points to pick? Will you be sitting down and making notes paragraph by paragraph? How will you make how will you make the notes now? By focusing on the end objective. What is the end objective? What legislation will keep kids, that is children, safe? Answer: POXO. Okay. Kids safe from sexual violence. Answer is POXO. Is it gender neutral? Yes. How do you know? This case as well as the General Clauses Act says so. That's all you need to know. Rest of that is just a argument. Clear? It's just an extension of the same thing. You can go back and read. You will find what is important, what is not important. Okay? This article again, swing but do not miss. India's battle against tuberculosis will need renewed vigor and focus. See, TB has historically been a very big killer when it comes to public health in India. You would be surprised to know that TB killed more people than COVID ever did. And yet, it doesn't get the kind of attention it deserves, primarily because it's not a public health emergency. We are not getting the due respect that this policy requires, primarily because this impacts poor people more. So the cost of this health crisis is disproportionately borne by poor people. Again, sociological impact of a policy choice. Okay, now let's take a look at the statistics given here. While the tuberculosis incidence has had the highest decline rate globally by 21% in 2015 to 187 per lakh population 2024, India remains among the countries with highest rates of TB, bearing 25% of the world's burden. 1 out of every 4 TB patient is in India. 1 out of 4 TB patients across the world is in India. So within the country, Uttar Pradesh has highest number of cases by the virtue of being the most populous state, and followed by Maharashtra, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh. Delhi has the highest TB infection prevalence rate. Why? Thanks to the air pollution, it has a magnifying impact. The quality of life is pretty bad in the national capital. Okay. Apart from this, as far as the multi-drug resistant TB is concerned, the scenario seemed quite challenging because 32% of the cases are in India. So you have tuberculosis as a theme, right from the causative agents, the policy choices, how is TB handled, what are the treatments available. Read the theme carefully because it is important both at prelims as well as mains level. Why? 1 out of every 4 patients are in India. Clear? Please read this. It's a self-explanatory thing. I'm just bringing it to your notice so that you don't miss it. Yeah, this article is anyway over. See, this article we will cover along with another theme. I'll cover it with a couple of articles others. Like we have this Nobel Prizes, right, in science and technology. Under that, frontier technologies is one theme where I want to take that entire class in a couple of days. Science, somewhere in December. When I'm dealing with that aspect, this topic will also be covered. So when I cover that, it will be in the form of both prelims and mains. Okay, I'll inform in advance. If you are someone who is regular to these lectures, make sure you don't miss out on those couple of days, because everything that is related to science and technology in the last 3-4 years will be covered in a couple of classes. If not couple, maybe we'll decide depending on the time. Global precision medicine market. See, we were talking about how it is important to understand our own body, immunotherapy, immunology. Precision medicine is an extension of how we treat diseases in human body. It's one of the sub branches of immunology. Or I would rather say it is one of the tool to serve the medicine. Precision medicine is an advanced technology wherein it will target the root cause and fix it. Let's say, for example, you have cancer. You have this CRISPR-Cas9 technology, which is a gene cutting tool. The gene which is responsible for genetic mutation and therefore cancer will be cut down using this molecular level technology. It's one of the example. There are many more such technologies, biologics, biosimilars, etc., which we will cover in those science and technology classes, especially in biotech. All of them work on the same premise. I will go back to the root cause, fix it there. It's the most common sense approach to deal a disease. But the problem, it's expensive. We'll deal about this topic in detail after we start those classes. Okay, so that's it for the day. Thank you.